All right, so welcome to the Indigo Rising Podcast. My name is Luke Segreto, and today my guest is Erica Onofrio. She is a Reiki Master, teacher and practitioner, and an intuitive healer. And thank you for sitting down with me today.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to just get into it a little bit here. And so just for people to give a little background about you and just how you came to become a Reiki Master.
So I was actually doing yoga teacher training, and something came up in an email about, learn Reiki. And about 8 years prior, so I had seen something about Reiki, and I was like, oh, that seems really cool. But then I never went anywhere with it. So while I was doing the yoga training, I thought, you know what, let me add Reiki to my list, and I can, use it in combination with yoga. And so I went and did the first training and just decided to go all the way with it. And it turns out I really don't do too much yoga anymore. I teach it just a little bit, and I'll teach privates, but mostly Reiki is where it's at for me.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. So I'm trying to think where we can dive into right here. But so I'm kind of curious. I've actually, you did a Reiki on me, and first of all, this place is great. I love the environment in here. And so how did you come to create this space?
So I kind of just had that intuition, that inner knowing that it was time to get a space. I was doing it in my living room, and it's lovely, lovely living room. It wasn't working, you know. So it was kind of like get a space, and I checked out only 2 places, and this one just kind of had the right feel. This building's 100 years old. It's right in downtown Ocean City, and Ocean City is a really unique place. It's a dry town. Almost feels like a different vibration going on here. And we also kind of attribute that a little bit to like the history with Ocean City. So before, the natives used to use it as a place for hunting and fishing. And then it was settled in the late 1800s by Christians, and like they actually used it only as a sanctuary for like their organization. So it's kind of just like healing grounds.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's a really neat thing. And then the building being as old as it is, it has a very special energy into it too. So kind of fell into exactly the right space. And then of course, the more work you do in a space, the more the energy shifts in
That's
there
awesome.
too.
Yeah, no, it definitely has a different vibe here because it almost doesn't even feel like we're in New Jersey here. And so I'm a little curious just with in terms of healing and just some of the types of things that you've seen, because for getting into Reiki, and because I'm sure that you like transitioning into that and doing more healing work, like what are some of the things that you've kind of seen, like because I've experienced some pretty amazing things like through Reiki, and I just, for people that may not be as familiar with Reiki or have never had it, like how do you kind of explain to people what's happening?
So the very most simplistic definition I use is that it's a Japanese technique for relaxation and stress reduction. And I think across the board that we all know that we could use that, right? I don't know why anyone's like, no, I don't need to not be stressed. So but that's like the most simplistic. And so what that does is that opens the door for anyone to be able to come in, right? Gotcha. Because, maybe you just need to relax for an hour. So that's that. And then it can really go further too. It can be like, I have a medical issue that I've been dealing with and I can't really get to the bottom of it. And so when we do Reiki, we can kind of dig up some of those deeper layers and find out what's going on in the energy body, so that we know what's going on in the physical body. So it's really one of those things that I find is so beautiful, because across the board, anyone can utilize it at any level, no matter what you believe in, it doesn't matter. It just works. I like to say, like, it's just magic. Just do magic.
That's great. Because I've had some pretty amazing experiences with Reiki, and I've gone to a few different people, and there is something definitely like with the energy healing that gets you into that space of just being and relaxing, that I found that regardless of the energy work that you're actually doing as a practitioner, like that absolutely helps. But it's so interesting that afterwards, right, that state that it gets you in, that when you leave, it's like, you get so relaxed, and it is such a, you said, a great stress reduction tool. And I think that's an interesting thing for for someone that's never even heard of it, right? Just from at least from that perspective, right? That it's we all have stress.
Right.
I just made a documentary about emotional stress specifically, and it's a big thing. Everyone I talk to, we all have stress, and we were just chatting a little bit before we started this conversation about just doing and being, right? Because I found that for me that I always need to be doing something. That there's something lately I've been kind of dialing back a bit, and I'm just curious with your perspective on that type of just always needing to be doing. That I feel like when I have a Reiki session, it's like, it gets me out of that state, and then it allows better things to come into my life.
It does, because we're switching the energy.
Yeah.
Right. So when we're always doing, because I lived that lifestyle, I had to wake up at this time and do all these things, and my days were packed, but where was I?
Yeah.
I wasn't really even in them. And so when we shift the energy too with that, and we kind of I spend a lot of more time just being. Yeah. Now. And what we do is we kind of change the way it works. So when we think about energy, we think about if I'm reaching for something, I'm always reaching, where instead if we just kind of sit and it'll come to me when it's supposed to come to me, we've shifted our energy, and then it really does. It's, as a society, we think well, then no, that's not how it works. Yeah. But I've seen it happen.
Yeah.
and I've seen it happen again and again, not only with myself, but with my clients too. And as they shift their energy, different things change, and it's we actually don't have to be doing all of the time.
Because it goes against everything that I was taught and everything that I spent my life expecting and believing. Because I've just found recently in my life that the more I've been meditating more, and the more I've just shifted into a state of being instead of constantly doing. I'm still doing things, but like you said, that from a different space, from a different energy, right? So when you're coming from that different energy, it is crazy how much easier things tend to happen, right? When you're in that flow state, that it goes against everything my conscious mind wants to believe. It's just so funny. I feel like that it's definitely. And from that place, like you're saying, that when you're in a being place, right? And you're in a being place and actually being there for your day. You're saying, going through the day, you think you're getting all this done,
right?
But then you're not even really aware of what is actually going on,
right?
That you actually create more problems for yourself,
right?
Right. So I'm curious from your perspective of how that's helped your life, shifting into that state of being, right? Shifting into that being place. Because I love this. Kyle Cease uses a great example that lighthouses don't go out and try to grab all the boats. They just shine their beacon, and they naturally attract what needs to come into their life. So I'm curious from your perspective, any experiences that you've had with that type of life living.
I do. I think that's exactly how it works, right?
Yeah.
I think that's exactly it, because and there's pieces to it, but when I was always doing that energy left me always also too in a state of lack. There's always more to be done. I'm always reaching for more, versus, and we could, go into a gratitude practice, but we don't need to do that. But versus kind of just being what I have is enough, and where I am is enough at this moment. Of course, we're always going to continue striving for more, but this is enough, and being present and enjoying this. So it's made me be able to be a better mother. It's made me be able to be a better friend, a family member, and certainly practitioner, because it's right now we have this moment. Let's be in this moment. And then we shift to the next moment. And the interesting thing is that I feel like I get 10 times more stuff done now than I ever did before when I was trying. Always struggling and pushing myself, and I sleep better, and I sleep a full night. So it's a really amazing way when we kind of start tinkering with our energy and how we do things. And I think that the scariest thing is making that first step. Right? We're just so terrified that oh no, I'm not doing it that way, because it might not work and everything's going to crash and burn, and the opposite is what happens.
And I'm a little bit in the middle right there, because over the past year, so many things have changed in my life and just transformed in ways I could have never imagined. But there's still like that little voice and like, I don't know, what if it's all not real? Like, what if you're just trusting in nothing? What if it's, what if everything falls apart and everyone leaves you? And like, there's still that chatter, you know? And I think that a lot of people find themselves in that place, right? A lot of people want to believe, and a lot of people have even had evidence in their life that this is how it works. However, there's still that little tiny voice that says, I don't know. There's like, it's so scared of what, and that's the thing. It's not even sure what. It's just scared of like what could, like, I don't know. Like, I'd rather be in this place that's comfortable. And I'd rather be in this place where even if it's not what I like, I can predict and see, because out there is kind of scary, right?
Well, so the thing though is it's actually not comfortable. That's the thing.
That's the thing, for sure.
We think it's comfortable because it's what we know.
Yeah.
So it's very scary to think that to get into something else. And unless you try, you don't know it for yourself. So it's like, right, you can read 100 self-help books, you know, you can listen to the podcast, right? You can like all the pictures on Instagram, but it's not until you like get up and you actually try and do something different and be living that more embodied version of it. And then when you start to see it, it's like, oh, this really does work. And then of course there's always that fear factor that kind of like wants to jump back in, but we don't listen to it, you know, or you give it I say to my clients, give it its 15 minutes of fame, let it talk and say what it needs to say, and then say, okay, I hear you, but I'm not listening to you. And I'm going to just do what I feel is right, like deep inside. And
you touched on a couple of points. One part I want to come back to is what you just said about how it's actually not comfortable. Because I think it's interesting that we justify to ourselves that it is comfortable, but we put ourselves through so much more stress resisting what our body is telling us, and our spirit and our whatever you want to call it is telling us, like, just do that. And you're like, ooh, I don't know. And then you go through all this suffering and struggle to not do what you just intuitively know. I just want to do this, right? It seems, but it's such an interesting conundrum, because I think that a lot of people can relate to that feeling, right? It's like, oh, I know I should do that, but I don't know. And it's funny how many years and months or however long of suffering we go through to when you finally just take that leap, and it's like, oh, this feels better. It's such an interesting piece. And I know you said you didn't want to share any practices yet. We don't have to go into that, but I would kind of like to go into a little bit just some of your, because I think this is something that can help people. And gratitude practices, again, for me and for you, it's a normal part of our life, but it's not. I forget that it's not normal for everyone to just be doing that. So I'm just curious. So some maybe just simple things that people can do in their everyday life to just start to shift that, right? Because I feel like gratitude is a huge piece, especially in my life, that has helped me get to where I want to go.
So with gratitude, the interesting thing is that it's again, we're working with energy when we really break it down all the way to the bottom. So like when I wake up in the morning, I think about all the things that I'm so thankful for before I even get out of my bed and start my day. So now I've already put that energy in my field of like abundance, because gratitude is, you know, for all of the things that I have of abundance in my life. And then it opens up the door for continued abundance to keep coming in, because again, it's just energy. Yeah.
I think it's interesting because it's reminding me of something that Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about. Like his book, Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, and how it's interesting how many things we do that are habits that we don't even think about. It's just so many things are on autopilot that we're not even aware that we're doing them, right? If we wake up out of bed, we're like, oh God. And you start the day like that, and then you trip over something, right? And like, that's your energy that you're in. That now it's going to be difficult if you don't do something to reroute that energy, your whole day is going to go like that, and it's going to keep snowballing, right? It's going to keep getting more ridiculous, and you're going to run into more situations. Because I found that my days tend to go like that. If I don't have that conscious moment, now obviously I use meditation, and that gets me very centered. But even before that, I feel like when I would start, it was like this catching myself, like, oh, like I should watch that. Like that chatter's starting. Yes. At the second I wake up. That's probably not the best way to start the day, right? There was something that you touched on earlier that I wanted to go back to.
I will say very quickly, though, you can always restart your day, right?
That's important.
So that's another thing too. And it can be it can even be, if it's available to you, a physical restart. Like go get back in your bed, close your eyes for 5 minutes and pretend that you're just getting up again. Because sometimes we need to do that, like put ourselves in timeout almost and be like, wait a minute, let me just take a minute. Where am I? What am I doing? And what do I really want to manifest today versus what I am, manifesting? Yeah,
because I think it's just important to draw our attention back to that you're talking about the energy. It's all energy, right? That we're putting out that energy. And I think that we weren't taught that. Like growing up, that was not the way that I ever considered. Like I think that just going back to just the way we think about what life is and the way we think about how things happen, we're taught that everything is random, right? It's in a material, mechanical world that we don't really have any control over it. And I feel like as you start to shift into this energetic way of being, that you don't even have to really think about like what it is you're changing, but it's more you can see that in your daily life. Because I found that, I don't know if one of the last couple episodes I talked about how I found that, or actually I was talking with my wife about this. I found that for me, over the past several months, it was this wave of going up and down and up and down. And I was getting such immediate feedback when I was in a down that like everything was terrible, right? And then when I'd go back up, all of a sudden everything was amazing. And then I'd go back down and everything was terrible again. It was like, after doing that a couple 100,000 times, that all of a sudden you're like, that I started to do experiments with myself that like, it was more of a reflective experiment, but when I would get out of a really down place, it was like, wow, all of the interactions I was having and everything in my life was reflecting that right back at me, that I was putting out all that energy and I would have all of these not favorable interactions or circumstances that would things would tend to be more difficult. Right. And that's, I'm curious about your experience with that type of feedback.
Absolutely. I actually, so when I used to work in a serving position for tips, I actually could watch myself have like this negative attitude, like I'm not making any money, and I wouldn't make any money. And then I started to shift that and I was like, you know what, let me play with this a little bit. And I was just like, I make a lot of money. People tip me really well. And people were tipping me when I wasn't even serving them. People were walking up and handing me money. I was like, this works great. But, and that's something so little. Yeah. But so then I was like, okay, well, if it's working here, then it's working everywhere. Yeah. Right. So, and that's the thing. It's like, that was like almost, a laboratory experiment of it. But like, what about in the rest of my life? And I watched myself shift in the way that I interact with family members and friends and try to move everything more towards a space of love, no matter what. Yeah. So, and that, that's another, of course, thing with energy, but moving towards that unconditional love. So where before it would be like, I'm only going to love you if you do this,
the conditional love.
Right. And it's like whoever you are. And so, and it affects all parts of our being. Yeah. And we also have the one thing that people do kind of have a hard time understanding, because some of my coworkers would try to do this, tipping thing too. They're like, first off, we have to give it a good amount of time, right? So we can't just say it once and then it changes. It has to be something continual, but we also have to really truly believe it. Yeah. Like deep down inside. For sure. And so we can, the
feeling of it, right?
Right. Because if we have the conscious mind working with us, but we also have a subconscious and we have an unconscious working too. So what's the energy that's going on in those spaces? Because we can consciously try to manifest something, but if the subconscious and the unconscious aren't on board as well, we're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, for sure. And that's an interesting piece. And like my documentary was going into a lot of that kind of stuff, because it's not just this, I tried it for a day, it didn't work, right? Because I mean, that's kind of the way we tend to test things out, because other things you try out in a day and it does work. So when it comes to changing our habits and rewriting our subconscious programming, it just takes a little more time. And I've found that it's a very interesting piece where when you're doing that type of work, that I found that I was always looking for a quick fix. I'm like, how can I see immediate results this week? and then my whole life changes. But I found that the more I fall in love with the process and really fall in love with, I just want to be better for me, right? And I want to be better for the people around me. Like I just don't want to go through the suffering that I'm putting myself through all the time anyway. And I found that in order to change a habit, there's tons of science about this. That Dr. Joe Dispenza does a lot of stuff about this, and forgetting the other guy's name right now, but there's so much brain science about how long it actually takes to reprogram, and that it can take Tony Ara, the guy that was in The Secret. I forget his last name right now, but I'll put a link to it. But he was talking about how certain things, it can take 30 days, 60 days, 120 days to actually reprogram certain things. And that's not a number that people like to hear. Like right. 120 days, it's, but I think but part of it, I think, is to have more fun with it, right? That right. It's not this, oh God, I got to do this for 120 days. Like you're saying with people that try, like, it's not working for me, right? We're so quick to decide it doesn't work that I feel like we just have to give it a little more. I feel like just being a little more transparent, that like it's taken me many, many, many years to be a little more fulfilled and be a little more content in what I'm doing, that it wasn't this overnight thing, that people can have amazing results or amazing changes like that, right? You can have a healing moment where it's just like, whoa, and then you have that amazing experience, but to really fall in love with the process. And I'm curious for you, like how just falling in love with the process and what that's been like for you.
I would say that you have to fall in love with yourself.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't love yourself, you're not going to put in all that work for yourself.
Okay.
So it's self-love and it's self-worth, right? Yeah. Too. Like, I'm worth it.
Yeah.
If I it was about 10 years ago, and I just remember thinking, like, there has to be another way to live. Like, this isn't working for me. And one of the first books that I read was The Art of Nonconformity.
Okay.
And I don't remember any of that book right now, but I remember at the time it being very transformative for me and my journey. And it kind of just got the ball rolling, and then it was like, and I started with little stuff, I started with, I remember I watched Food Inc. And so it was like, oh, I can't eat this anymore, but it was like, I don't want to put that in my body anymore.
It's a different feeling.
Right. It was different. So, and then over the years, I've continually made the changes, but it's, and in that process, my self-worth and my self-love has grown too. Yeah. And then that's the thing. It's like, you have to know that you're worth it.
Yeah.
Like, are you really truly happy? Because when we sit down at that, with it, when we really sit with it and we stop the running and the posting and all of this stuff, right? Are you really truly happy? Because if you are, awesome. Yeah. Keep your life how it is. You don't need me. Yeah. You don't need to listen to us talking. But if not, then something needs to change. So where do you start? And it's, you pick one little thing.
For sure.
You get started on it. And before long, it becomes you. And then it's not something that's difficult, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't give up things.
Yeah.
I don't need those things anymore.
And I think that's what you're talking about, one little piece at a time. That's a great piece of advice, because I found that for me and my wife, we've gotten to a lot of places where we're like, okay, everything needs to change today, and it's difficult. You do it for 3 days and you go, okay, whatever, and then you just go right back into what you're doing. But I found that instead of trying to get rid of all the things that aren't working, like, just start to do little things that you love, right? Add in like you said, 5 minutes, right? 5 minutes at the beginning of the day. Let's just sit here and be mindful and put a little intention into what it is that I'm doing. It doesn't mean that that you may have a lot of people have a lot of blocks with loving themselves, and myself and we all have so much programming. Again, it's from our parents and their parents, and it's been going on forever, and it's fine. But I feel like once you start to bring awareness to it, then you get to have the choice about it. Because a lot of it, when it's unconscious, you're not even aware of it. And I think that's the most difficult part, is that you don't just have a conscious mind. You have all of that subconscious and unconscious stuff that's going on, that as it starts to come up, that it's uncomfortable. Right. And it can be not things that we want to look at. And I found for me, though, that it becomes a lot more difficult to not look at it when it's coming up for you, than, because it's like, oh, I don't want to go there. But it's so much more work and so much more money and so much more time ignoring what's trying to come up, right?
And energy.
So much energy.
That's the
draining
thing. It's draining energy.
Yeah.
So like when I'm working with clients and there's a false belief that they're operating from, or maybe there is something that's going on in the subconscious mind that we pull up and find. And, sometimes they're conscious of it and sometimes they're not conscious of it. But I'm like, as soon as we break this energy off, you have so much more energy for what you do want. It takes a lot of energy to run like negative thought patterns in our mind.
It does. So much energy. And that's something that I've actually experienced in my own life, that I've had some pretty amazing healing sessions over the past several months. And after each one, there's so much more space, and just being aware of that programming and looking at it and going, I'm not going to entertain this program anymore. That I'm not going to go down that negative self-talk for 20 minutes, an hour, a week, a month, like I would have in the past. And I feel like once you're able to not entertain that, there's so much more energy.
Yeah.
Right. There's so much, all of a sudden it's like, wow, I didn't realize how draining that was to be entertaining those thoughts all day long. Cause I think that strictly from that perspective, that it's tiring, and we're all stressed and tired enough that if you add all that other stuff that you're throwing your energy into that you don't need to be throwing your energy into, there's so much more space.
Right.
There's so much more energy there, right?
Right. And for all the things that you do want and you do love.
Indeed.
And for those things to come in.
Yeah.
And like I notice every time that we peel back, some of that stuff, then new things that are joyous come in, or new things that, are loving come in.
Yeah.
Or new things that are peaceful. Like we have space for that.
Yeah.
And, a lot of this too is like, we don't know that there's a different way to be and to feel. Yeah.
And again, it's we're all only going off our experiences, so it's someone like you or someone like me that starts to have these experiences. You just want to share it with everybody. And like, that's part of the reason I'm doing this podcast. Cause I want to I'm having these amazing changes in my life, and I want to talk to other people like you to find out, like, it's not just me, right? Other people are having these experiences too. And, there was something I was going to say that when you have a healing experience, right? When you have something where some part of you comes up, right? And you let go of that piece, right? You see, oh my God, this was just negative self-talk. And you realize that and you let it go. I found that you're talking about the space again, right? The energy that you're not putting into it, but also we're talking about the space that creates. When you create that space, I found that then there's space for things to come into your life. That before, you were saying that when you're always in that chase, I remember now. You're saying that chasing, when you're in that chasing mindset, that's actually an energetic vibration that you're in, right? You're actually saying to the universe, I don't have enough right now. Like, I need that thing, and I can't be happy until I get that thing. And that's something that I find that for me, that my ego still has a tough time with this. My mind just doesn't, it knows this, but I think in a lot of people that we find ourselves like, it's so great. Like right now that I have this amazing life, I have this amazing job, I have an amazing wife, I have all these amazing things. And then but still the mind is like, but I just need that more. I just need a little bit more. That it's so interesting that if you can just speak to just that a little bit, just that it's not just like you realize it once and it's over, right? That it's a practice, right? And I'm curious with your experience with that, because the mind wants to think, great, we figured it out, let's just do it. That I don't have to pay attention to that anymore, right?
Well, and because you know what, it's like a spiral, right? So we identifying it is the tip of the spiral, but then we have to keep kind of pulling it out. And so sometimes that spiral is dug really deep in there. And so it's a process. Yeah. So like you had said before, some things you can have a healing session and we kind of pull something out and it's just like, oh, cool, that's gone now. Yeah. And we don't even have to think twice about it. But other sessions, it's like, we're still working on this, but we're peeling back the next layer of this. Yeah. But even in just peeling back that next layer of it, it's still something. Yeah. Like it's still an energetic shift. And how you were talking about how you went with those ups and downs, right? Yeah. So that's kind of like that evidence almost of like that the shifting. Feedback, of the it's almost instantaneous feedback,
for sure.
And so when you do it enough,
yeah,
then
sure.
eventually
For sure.
you're like, okay,
Yeah.
you know, you have, at some point we have to hold up the white flag
Yeah.
and just surrender.
Yeah.
And just be like, you know what, maybe I don't know the best way,
Yeah.
like me personally. Let's just see what, you know, happens
Yeah.
and see what comes. There's another piece to that. It's about trusting,
Yes.
right? But so many of us are like, well, what am I trusting
Yeah.
in? And it will trust in yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's really, you know, you're going to show up for you at the end of the day. So like,
sure.
no matter what happens, you know, it's you. It could either be you against you or you for you.
Yeah.
Which would you like it to be?
And I think that that's a powerful piece for a lot of people too, because a lot of people say like, well, what am I trusting in? Like, what am I letting? Like, I don't want to surrender. Who am I surrendering to? You know. But it's really that there's the intelligence that's present in your body, that's already there. You're just surrendering to that.
Right.
It's not to anybody else. It's to you.
Yeah.
And I think that if a lot of people that I know that trust issues is a big thing for a lot of people, that like, what am I trusting in? Well, start with yourself. Right. That like, well, I can't trust in myself, but like, I feel like I'm just thinking, because I always hear the other voice in my brain, like the practical, like, how does this apply to people, right? How does this apply to someone that goes, well, I don't trust and I don't want to do that, you know? So I think that just from that perspective, that I felt for me, and I've the way I've seen it change in a lot of people's lives is just adding that little bit in again, right? Like not trying to change everything in a day, right? That Rome wasn't built in a day, that it is that still that just to be conscious, to be easier on yourself. And if you see yourself like, oh, I suck, I can't believe it. Like, just if you hear yourself doing that, right? To just, step one is just noticing that.
Right.
Because for years, I didn't notice that I was doing those things.
Right.
You know, that like, I'd notice some programs, but there were still lots of other programs that I just wasn't aware. Right. So I think that step one is just, if you catch yourself, like, be excited about that, right? Because I found for me lately is that the way I've shifted my thinking about a lot of this stuff is that I'm excited about triggers now. It's like if something comes up, it's like, great, something I can look at now, you know? But that wasn't the way I was taught to think about this stuff. It's like I think a lot of us are scared of triggers and scared of like having that stuff come up. But now I'm so excited because it's like, thank you. I'd rather deal with it now in a nice controlled setting, right? And go to Reiki and like deal with it this way rather than I'm in a crowded group of people and then it comes up there and then I have some thing happen in a way that I don't really want it to have happen, right?
Yeah. And the other thing too about it is, you know, because you're saying have it come up, and that's the thing is like, let it come up and out.
Yeah.
Because for so many years I squashed it all.
Yeah.
Right. Like, no, shh,
Yeah.
shh. Like, I don't want to hear it, you know? And I think a lot of us do that. And it's like, if we don't listen to what it's trying to tell us, how are we going to grow?
Yeah.
It's all it is a messenger that is like dressed in dark clothing
Sure.
and looks mean, but it's really not, you know? It's just like, it's actually a way to freedom.
And that's the powerful part there, because I think that I feel like a good question that I started to ask myself is like, am I happy with everything in my life right now? Right, and that's a good place to start, because it's like a lot of people, because like a lot of times you hear back like, well, I'm fine with my life the way it is, so great. Like if you're happy the way you, like you said before, if you're happy with you doing what you're doing, by all means do what you're doing.
Right.
Like keep following whatever is making you happy and do that. But I found that a lot for me, it was like looking at my outside world and saying, okay, what is it that, like, certain things that I would feel stuck in, right? Or certain things it's like, okay, what do I need to address here that is getting in the way of me being present, like getting in the way of me living the life that I actually want to live? And that has always led me down the correct path, because something I think is kind of funny that maybe some people can relate to, well, not specifically, but for me, with growing up with NET and having, doing emotional work growing up, I kind of had this spiritual ego that, like, that's what I'm calling it looking back, like this, like, oh, I already know all my programs, right? I already know everything. I don't have to, I'm so aware of it. I get all this, I go to get all this work done. It's fine. I know everything. But it's so funny, even with that, how many thousands of programs were running that I was clueless about, right?
Right. And then we still have, like,
yes,
we,
of course,
we
so many more.
I
keep
so
seeing
many
them.
more. Right. I don't think it ends.
Yeah, for
you
sure.
know, and it's almost, weekly, daily, whatever. It's like, oh gosh, I'm doing this, So, and that's the thing is like kind of when you find one of those programs, right? Yeah. You got to look at it, and ask yourself, I always say like, is this serving me? Yeah. Like, is this really like, is this helping me? And if it's not, then it has to go. Yeah. And some things, I do feel that some things are, it's just like, maybe we don't have to get rid of everything, but we have to accept it. Yeah. So there's that part of it too. But that's a great question of, are you happy with how every single thing in your life is going? If you can tell me every single thing is perfect right now for you and you don't want to make any changes at all, like, then you need to teach me.
No, for sure. And that's such a powerful piece. And then because of that is why I think that you have to have fun with it. Yeah. And I think that a lot of times with a lot of healing and spiritual work, it becomes this heavy, like, oh, I got to get to the bottom, that like, you're never going to get all the way to the bottom, right? You may get to the bottom of this particular issue, which is great, which all of a sudden opens up new issues, right? And I think that that's why it's like, oh God, I got to keep, but that's why I found for me, if I don't start to have fun with this, it's going to be a tough, rough life,
Right. Or you're going to throw in the towel.
For sure. Too. Yeah.
And I think there is a point of no return.
For sure.
Some point. Especially when you start to see things coming into fruition. Yeah. And but like every day is just a new adventure. For sure. Right? Yeah. So what's today gonna unfold? For sure. And it's just the next 24 hours, and then the next day has another 24 hours. And when you make it fun, it makes it it's just definitely easier on you, but it also makes it available too.
And something that I've started to realize in my life is that you can't make mistakes. And I know that that's a very difficult thing in our society, just because we put so much emphasis on every single decision we make all the time. But I found that rather than like, what are you doing? Like, who are you being? Like, how do you feel through these decisions? Because I found that if I come from that place that like, you know what, that I'm doing the best I can and I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to look back and say, I could have done that differently, but I found that I get growth either way. And for me, what the mistakes is usually where I get more growth anyway. Right. Like I have bigger growth from the things where I thought I did what I shouldn't. I thought I made the wrong decision. But then it just pushed growth in a different area that I wasn't even ready for. And then that growth led to more growth, which has led to me being happier. Right. And it's led to me being more fulfilled. And it's led to me living the life that I want to live and being able to help people in a better way. Because I found that for me, a big piece was when I was younger, I'm like, I need to change the world today. I need to go out on my mission and my crusade and fix everything. And it's just so funny how I hadn't even looked at my own stuff yet. Mm-hmm. Like I wanted to fix everybody else, but I hadn't fixed my problems. I hadn't actually started to look at my own issues. And that's why I think through these conversations that it's bringing up a lot of stuff in me. And I'm watching back these episodes and going, wow, that's something I need to look at. And just some of the stuff that comes out in these conversations is like, wow, there's a judgment. There's a belief. There's something that I can look at. Yeah. And I think I'm hoping that through this, that I'm going into these conversations with no plan because I want to see what's going to come up, that I'm inviting it in, that I'm inviting in what's going to come up. Am I going to dig some stuff out? Right. And like, again, it's on camera. What a great place to do that. But it's just, I feel like I'm living my life in an organic way. So I feel like I wanted my video work to be reflecting that. I want to be living from a more authentic, transparent place, that if everything I do in my life is organic and I make mistakes and I mess up my words, that why not, I should be filming it the same way, right? A conversation that I have with a friend, I don't say everything beautifully and clearly every single time, so I might as well share it this way, exactly the same,
Yeah. And I had something.
Sorry.
Oh, that's what it was. So it's funny. There's two things that I teach when I teach Reiki. Okay. One is, the first thing is you can't make a mistake. Okay. Awesome. Which is what my teacher had taught me. And I was like, great. I can definitely do this job. The second is that you have to be your own best customer. Okay. Right? Yeah. If I'm not my own best customer, how am I going to show up for anyone that walks through my door? and we all have our days, of course, like I have some days where I'm just like, I feel unsettled or I feel off. Something is, rustling inside of me and I don't know what it is, but I just have to accept it and I still do my job and go through my day. And I think that that even was a big learning piece for me in this process, because before I would think like, oh gosh, if I feel like this, like I can't show up for other people, but well, we can. And like you said, like you just learn through all of it. Yeah. Every piece.
And it's just such a powerful shift in my life that, because I feel like before I was so scared of every single decision. It's like, oh shit, is this the right video? Is this the right way I should be doing this? Is this the right color? Is it, is this the right color on the graphic? Is this the right font? All of these things, it's just like, who cares? Change it. If you don't like it, do it differently next time. And I think that's, for me, I always called myself a perfectionist, and I was always I wanted every little detail to be right. And through this podcast series, it's been like a real wake-up call for me. To just really you know what? Let it go. It's fine. If this video isn't the right way, then I can improve for the next one. And it doesn't have to be this. And I found since I've let go of that perfectionism, everything flows so much better. And like I've found I've had such more meaningful conversations since I've let go of that need that like this needs to be the perfect conversation. Because I feel like we always saw everything in these perfect, neat little like bits where it's like everyone talks perfectly all the time. That we get this false sense of that everyone I listen to, they're just these magical, perfect people that like they always talk perfectly and they never make a mistake. But like, I think that's why long form conversation is so necessary and important, because you're watching these people in longer form conversations. They get lost. They mess up their words. It's like, oh, so we're not all perfect anyway. It was such a relief for me. And I'm hoping to share that for other people that feel like everything has to be perfect all the time, because it doesn't. And there's so much more energy and freedom and less stress realizing that and just letting it go,
And you can change anything at any time. That's one thing that I have been realizing with my business. I thought that like whatever I laid out in the beginning as like my platform and how it was going to be and how I was going to do things, like, oh, I better make it right because I'm not going to be able to change it. And then I was just like, well, who's going to stop me? I'm my own boss. And, and with anything, like I always ask myself that question a lot. Like, well, who's going to stop me? Only me would be the one stopping me from changing things.
And I think, I bring up Kyle Cease a lot because I've learned so much from just all the work that he does, and just a lot of times I think the thing that is the heaviest in our life, it talks about like just like in your life, like what's light and what's heavy, right? The things that are lighter and feel easier, like that's probably the stuff you're meant to be doing anyway. The stuff that comes naturally to you, and those types of things that just flow and it's like effortless and all of that just naturally happens, that's where you should be putting your energy. And a lot of times I find that the stuff that's difficult and the stuff that where you are really scared, like what decision do I make? And you're in some situation where everything is stressful all the time, that there may be something that's pushing you in a different direction. That like maybe that job isn't the right job for you. That if it's the worst thing all the time, right? If it's really difficult, that may be like just giving the little tap that like maybe you should explore other options. That there's always other options out there. For every one of us, because I found for me when I was in jobs where I thought like I can never leave, like I can never get, I'm saying that once you just realize that maybe that it's time for me to move on, maybe it's time for me to explore a new opportunity. And I found that when I was able to just let go of that heavy piece that wasn't working for me anymore, that I have a friend, Michael Pires, who says that if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And then if you can once you let go of it, it's just it creates so much more space for the things that are actually trying to come into your life. At least that's how it's worked in my life.
Absolutely. And it's terrifying the first time.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. But I think once you do it that first time and you see like, okay, I didn't die. There was no catastrophe. Then it gets a lot easier to keep doing it. For sure. And then it's almost like, cool, what can I do now?
I actually, the experience that I had in my life, the job that I was working at, and another thing Michael Pires said also was that it's okay that something was a yes maybe a year ago and now it's a no. That there's nothing, that it doesn't take away from anything. Because I think we go, oh God, I've wasted all this time. But you haven't. And for me, in my experience, the job that I was working, it was great. And it was expanding me. And I was using all my creative abilities. And then it got to the point where I wasn't anymore, where I wasn't growing anymore. And it just was no longer the right fit for me. And I was at a meditation group, again, with Michael Pires. And something in that moment, that just the energy in that moment, it was just, I had this release and I started crying. And just in that moment, it was just such a release. And the only thing I knew in that moment was, I need to quit my job right now. That nothing matters, but that's the next step. And I need to take that step right now, because if I wait till tomorrow, I'm going to change my mind and it's not going to happen. So I took the leap. And I'm not going to say that the days after I wasn't a little scared. I was like, oh God, I quit. Like, is this the right decision? But like, once I opened up that space, there was so many opportunities came like immediately. Yeah. There was so much space that I had never had that much space before. But it was just like, I had multiple opportunities coming in, it's just such an interesting thing. Like you're saying, I'm not going to say that it won't be scary, but
right.
But it's just, like I said, the suffering that I was going through, ignoring that calling, it was so much more stress. And it took so much more energy to ignore that voice.
Yes.
Right?
And that's the thing, is that if you have that inner knowing, that deep inner knowing, and you can tell the difference, because it's, like you said, you were in that quiet space. So you were alone with yourself. You were able to connect with yourself. And so when we connect in that space, that's where all of your answers are. Yeah. All of them are inside, and then that's what I'm doing when I'm doing an intuitive reading is, I'm just finding the answers for you, because right now you aren't in the space yet where you can find them yourself. And then I always tell, my clients, like, my goal is for you to not need me. I want you to get to the point where you can find all of this information yourself and be able to make these changes yourself. But it's finding that and then listening to it, which was the next thing that you did. You're like, you know what? I'm going to quit my job. And then you knew yourself enough to know too, like, and I'm not waiting till tomorrow. Because if we wait till tomorrow, then the ego jumps in and the rational mind is giving all the reasons why you absolutely cannot quit your job. Are you crazy?
For sure.
But exactly what you said was, I had a very similar experience when I was jumping into the full time in the business and leaving behind the job with the benefits and, and the schedule and like the guaranteed money. And of course it was terrifying. And of course, there were moments where it was like, I think I made a big mistake, but I didn't. It was like deep inside, I knew, like, no, this is absolutely what I need to do. And it was just that rational mind that likes to hop in every so often and just like, okay, we feel fear because it's absolutely normal to feel fear. That's just, we're humans, right? Like, we feel fear, but we can't let it control us. And that's the difference that one of my early yoga teachers had that pushed that one big. It's like, feel the fear, don't let the fear control you.
You said like 7 awesome things that I want to go back to, but specifically something I want to highlight is how you said that, like, talking about how your goal is for people to not need you, right? And I found that that's the space that our entire world, that we're moving into a collaborative space. That's the difference from last century, the old way of thinking about things, that everything's a competition, and that if you share and you help somebody, they're not going to come back. That's the old way of thinking. And I found that for me, just realizing that and seeing the way things are just shifting in that way, that as you give your gifts more, right, as you help more people and they don't need you, that actually helps more people. Right. And that actually gets more people that you're able to, right? That actually will attract more clients. That is such a different way of thinking that I feel like it was always the being scared of letting people know what you're doing. Like, for me as a video person, like, I don't want people to, like, that's the way that a lot of people would think like 10 years ago. Even for me, growing up in learning from other people that were professionals, that, like, you need to keep that to yourself, because that if anyone finds out what you're,
don't share your secrets.
Don't share your secrets. But I found that you are you. There's not another you. that your secrets, that's not, I found that as I'm able to share my secrets of making videos and all that types of stuff, that empowers other people to live their truth. That's not giving me away. How can like that? How can I give me away? And I think that's the shift that's happened here, right? That's the shift that we're moving into, right?
Right. And then I do say that all comes back again to like the valuing yourself as a person.
Yeah.
And like, I'm valuable. I have something to offer this world that no one else can offer. And each one of us has something special. Yeah. Even when I teach Reiki, I'm teaching it, but I'm telling them like, look, I do it this way. Yeah. I'm going to give you all my secrets, but I would like you to create your own special way that you can offer to the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and make it your own. And teaching has been interesting because then what's going on with that is that the people that I teach, they're able to reach a whole new subset of people that I maybe wouldn't have had any kind of access to. Yeah. And so it spreads the Reiki, right? Yeah. It spreads that whole process.
And I think that gets more into, again, like how, in terms of changing the world and trying to make a positive impact on the world, that type of shifting into that like way of thinking is what's going to be necessary.
Yeah.
Because from the old way of thinking, it just doesn't compute, right? It just doesn't make sense. How could we possibly fix anything? But from this space, when it's a collaborative space, and you realize that you helping those people, that allows them to use their gifts, because before that, they may not be using their gifts.
Right.
You know, so that you empowering people to be able to use their gifts, that empowers other people to be able to use their gifts. And I think that's the world we all want to live in, right? Where people are able to be authentic and be able to be themselves and be true and transparent. And I think that's kind of what the space that we're moving into in this century, right? That right now, that's the big shift that's happening. That the internet, I've talked about this before, but the internet was just kind of born out of it, this whole collaborative idea in the first place, right?
Right. And we should all be, it's holding hands, right? And moving forward instead of like fighting with the next guy. Because the reality is there's enough for everyone.
For sure.
And that's the thing too. So again, it's a pulling out of that lack of sure. I got to get, and so there's plenty for everyone. And we're all just going to share it
and
with
it's so
each other.
It's so interesting too that, because I know that this, like, hearing like abundance consciousness or like lack consciousness, a lot of people go, yeah, well, that's not going to, like, because I always hear that voice in the back of my head. They're like, yeah, that's not going to work that way. But I think an interesting piece of that is that like the energy that you're holding, right? When you're feeling abundant, that like the space that you're in when you're interacting with people, because then you're not in this fear place, that you're not interacting with people from a fear place.
Right.
Because I found that if you even just take away that piece of it, right, to just the energy that you're holding for other people, that if you're thinking everything's a competition, right, that then there's someone you may be able to have an amazing collaboration with, that now you're like, oh, they're going to beat me. Because I found that was a program that I had to a belief that I had to deal with, that growing up in going into the film industry and doing all this stuff is this idea that it's a competition and that you want to be the next best person. That it's just that underlying like vibe that's just kind of there, that maybe we're not addressing it, but you can like feel that if you get that job, that like means I don't get that job, you know, that, right. But it's shifting into this place now with the internet that there's just so much opportunity there. It's just in a different way. It's in a different way than we're used to seeing. So that's why a lot of people say there's no jobs. I'd say that there's so many more opportunities than there has ever been right now.
And that's creating your own job
for sure. Then that's the big difference. That's the big shift.
Yeah. Creating and not being afraid and not being scared of it and just jumping off the cliff and doing it. And you know, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, really, you know, if for some reason it doesn't happen, it's like, well, you can always go back. That's what I would tell myself too sometimes. I'm like, you can always go back to the old way of living if this new way doesn't happen. But like, I don't want to. Yeah, sure. I don't think I ever will, you know. But yeah, I mean, you can always go back, but why not try something new?
For sure.
It's I even have that on my website, right? Maybe it's time to try something new. Yeah. Because if what you're doing isn't working, then, you know, you're just the hamster on the wheel. Yeah. You're not getting anywhere.
Yeah. And I think that's been a big piece. I'm assuming for you, I speak from my experience, that once you get a little taste of it, you're like, well, this is better. Right. You're like, that I enjoy this more. Yeah. And it's just, and again, the feedback when you're doing these things and you're dealing with it, and you get, like, when you start meditating, you get that like center and feeling, and you're feeling from your heart. And that's something I wanted to come back to. Something you said earlier about how it's easy to know when you're in your center. Because I think that this is probably the question that I hear the most just online, and people asking other people, and just the confusion between how do I know what's my heart? Like, how do I know it's my heart? And how do I not know that it's my head? And I found that even that question is not your heart.
Right.
that coming from, I'm curious of your perspective, but from my perspective, that when you're in an emotionally, because a lot of my background has been growing up with NET, that I've had this work done my whole life, and my dad is a practitioner that does NET, and just firsthand seeing a lot, just emotional realities that I think, but there's a lot of confusion between what is my emotion coming up and what is my feeling, like my gut feeling, or like the feeling that I'm having in my heart. Because I found that a lot of times if you're in a charged emotional state, you go, I have the feeling that I need to just lash out and hurt. You know what I'm saying? So like, I think that a lot of people, if they're not aware of their emotional reality, may have a tough time kind of discerning between, is this my emotions or is this my feelings? I'm just curious of some, like, your perspective with that.
I think that it's very valuable to start the relationship with yourself so that you can get to know the difference. Yes. Because there's absolutely sometimes that feeling thing that arises, and you think you have to react on the feeling, and you don't, right? Between a stimulus and a response, you have a space. Yeah. And then what in that space, that's your power and your freedom to make that choice. And so if we react to the feeling, things can get pretty hairy. Yeah. Right? Of course, we can't make a mistake, but we can also create more triggers than we want at one time. But when we get to know ourselves on a deeper level, you can kind of tell the difference, right? Mm-hmm. So, and like, I'm more of an auditory person, so I kind of hear my intuition, and it's like almost as if it's lower on the right side, and it's like a very sweet, gentle voice, and it's like, yeah, I know, and it's like a very calm and peaceful feeling that comes through with it. And I just know that this is what to do. And if it's my ego or my rational mind, it's usually up here on my left side, and it's like frantic, The
energy is different.
The energy is totally different. And I've learned very recently to just listen to that voice no matter what, the one that's very gentle and quiet and on the right, and that my intuition. And sometimes my rational mind wants to be like, no way. But I've been just doing the I learned not to ask questions. You actually said that last time you were here. You were like, I've learned not to ask questions. And so I've just been rolling with it, and doors have been opening up that have never opened up before, simply because, stepping into that new space. So I do think that it's progressive. I do think that, if you have no kind of deep touch with yourself and can't really distinguish between feelings and emotions and ego and heart, don't make major life decisions.
Yeah, that's right a good now, first,
right?
A good piece of advice.
So, start with step one, and step one is really choosing an avenue that will help you connect closer with yourself.
I like that.
Whether that's journaling, whether it's a guided meditation is great for some people to get started with.
I did that to start as well.
Right, because it's a little bit easier than jumping in the silent meditation boat.
Yeah.
You can listen to the binaural beats, right, and kind of that backdoors you in, because it kind of goes around the ego mind and kind of doesn't give you a choice.
For sure. And sorry.
But anyway, the bottom line is getting to know you and creating the way that you know your own answers. And then once you feel comfortable with that process, you start it with small things. Then you build to the bigger things, and then and you feel safe, and then that's kind of how you move forward with everything else.
I like that. That's an important. I just like the way you said that getting to know yourself. There's really no way around that. that if you want to start to do that, getting more in touch with yourself is step one. And for me, I couldn't sit still for 5 minutes before this was in the beginning of January is when I started meditating, and I downloaded the Calm app, and it was a 10-minute guided meditation, and that was an incredible accomplishment. And it's important to there's also a million things on YouTube. You can find a guided meditation. There's millions there, and just starting with that, I think, is so important to just you said another cool thing that I think the word knowing is really important, because I hear that question a lot. Like, how will I know? Like, knowing means zero doubt. Knowing means that if you're like, how do I know? That's the ego, first of all. Right. If you're asking, how do I know? Like, when you know, you know. Like, we've all had moments in our life where it's just like, yes, like 100% yes. Like, this is whether it's when you're playing a sport, when you were just out with your friends, whether it was just like in that moment, like just you had the knowing that like, yes, that like I feel so good in this moment, right? Because I found for me that all questions are ego. That's what we said. That like if it's all questions are coming for ego, like how do I know about this? Which one is it? Which decision? That again, I think that I forget that you still have to, that step one is not what decision do I make? Step one is get to know yourself a little bit. Because I think that is an important piece. That number one, don't make any crazy life decisions. If you've never if you haven't sat down to like, maybe like go see someone get Reiki done or do something that to kind of kick you off or give you that push that you need to start and help. Because there's so many people like having Reiki done from you and there's so many other people that I've had meaningful encounters with that have helped me in times where I didn't know what to do, you know, like we can all relate to that moment, right? That moment where I don't know what decision to make, and that taking it back, that no matter what decision you make, it's okay, right? That you can never really make a wrong decision. And that also that just do something for yourself, that show yourself a little more love, right? That it all has to start from showing yourself a little more love. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think we're start to wrap it up a little bit now. This has been great. We can keep going on forever, but yeah. I'm just realizing some things just going through all of this right now. I think that's just a really powerful thing. If you have any last things you want to say, but just that the whole concept is just really getting to know yourself, right? And if you want to speak just a little more to that, to just like showing yourself love, because it's I think that we are in a world where we look, everything is external, right? That we look for internal things externally. I mean, I've been doing it my whole life. We're all pretty familiar with that, but that we're always looking externally for, all I really want to do is sit down for half an hour, right? But like I'm looking, where does all the answers? Just if I just sit there and be quiet, oh, they were right there. I didn't have to go anywhere else. But
it's true. They're all inside. And exactly what you said is if you aren't able to get there yet, right? And it also seems to try to do it on your own, then seeking someone out, seeking out someone who, going to a group meditation. Yeah. The energy in those ones is great.
Help me.
Yeah. Very different. Taking a yoga class or visiting someone who does Reiki or a different healing modality, and just, starting there. Yeah. Like it's a lot of times with my clients, I'm like, this is the first day of the rest of your life. And it really is. Yeah. You can really make that change. And it's starting small, and like we're going up the mountain. Yeah. But it's beautiful. Like, and the scenery, along the way, it's not about getting to the top either. We forget that sometimes, and we get,
I need to hear this too.
Yeah. We want to get just to the top. I want to see what the scene looks like up there, but it's like, well, but what about all the beautiful things that we're passing along the way? So just enjoying every moment of life each day, and kind of just bringing it all back to like, hey, what are we doing here? Yeah. The fact that you exist is like pretty remarkable.
It is pretty remarkable
in and of itself. So it's like, and you didn't come here to be struggling all of the time and to be having a hard life. Like, you came here to really enjoy and learn and build and grow and see what you can create. Amen.
And that's all really fantastic. And I just want to add in from my perspective, just to really I really want to harp on this, because maybe it's just I need to hear this again, but just that to really give yourself credit. Like you're saying, like what you just said, I think is so important. I want to highlight it, that to not miss the journey. Because I think that I get caught up a lot, and I know a lot of other people do too, that we want to get to this place, right? That even with this podcast, like I want to grow it, I want to have a bigger production, I want to do all this stuff, but I don't want to miss the whole ride. Because what's the point of doing this, right? If I'm not enjoying the ride, that like I'm going to be missing my whole life. And I think that's just because I follow a lot of stuff that gets me pumped up to want to get stuff done and do all of that stuff. That stuff is important, but it's so important to also enjoy the process, to not miss the whole, not to miss the trip. You know, the trip is as important, because you get to the end and it's like, oh, well, what about, I wasn't enjoying the whole trip. You know, it's just that whatever it is that you're reaching for, because for me, doing film work and being in the media industry, it's just, we all get so hyper focused. For other people doing type of stuff that I do, get so focused on the accomplishments and getting there that just gotta take a breath, just take a deep breath and just come back and just really make sure that, just ask yourself, because I had found that I hadn't asked myself, like, why am I doing this? Like, what is it that, like, is this what I want to be doing? And that the more I asked those questions, it kind of rerouted me into what it is I wanted to be doing, and found that I was able to just be more meaningful and intentional in what it is that I'm doing. So I just want to acknowledge you for first of all, for sitting down with me today. It was so great. And just for doing what you're doing, for doing Reiki and just teaching Reiki and just empowering other people. It's so important right now, just to get more of that energy out there, and just to be teaching people and helping people become more aware that what they're doing matters, right? and that, like, your life matters, that every human being's life matters, and that the more we can empower one another, the more we can start to foster that kind of attitude with one another. We can start to embody that in our everyday lives. So just thank you so much for sitting down with me. And until next time.
Thanks for having me.